The Last of Us on the PlayStation 5 offers, with the right settings and the right TV or screen, up to 5 different performance modes. We have 4K 30 FPS, we have 4K 40 FPS, we have 1440p 60 FPS, and now when we're considering the VRR verbal refresh modes, then we have 1440p up to 120 FPS and a 4K 40 FPS plus, which means more than 40 FPS in native 4K. But believe me, this is very, very rare. Okay, so let's talk about the different performance modes on the PlayStation 5, and I think we should start with the, in my opinion, worst mode, the 4K 30 FPS mode. And what I've done is, I just like to show you this. I have turned off the 120 Hz mode on the PlayStation 5 and also VRR. So we just actually pretending at the moment we have just a 60 Hz panel, and therefore we just have 4K 30 FPS and of course the 1440p 60 FPS mode. And yeah, this right now 4K 30 FPS, I have to admit, it is very, very sharp. The optic, the picture, the visuals are actually very, very sharp. There is almost zero aliasing, no shimmering, nothing. The picture quality is actually really, really good. But what I don't like is 30 FPS. I just can't stand it anymore, especially on an OLED TV. It's just, yeah, not enjoyable at all. Very sorry for that, but that's my opinion. I don't like 30 FPS games at all. And because I'm such a big fan of 30 FPS games, let's just quickly change into the performance mode with 1440p and 60 FPS. And yes, I have to admit, there is a downgrade in terms of resolution. You can clearly see this. 4K is just much sharper, but more obvious actually is 60 FPS, stable 60 FPS. I personally haven't experienced any stuttering so far, but I mean, I haven't played the game or the full game so far, but it looks to me that the 60 FPS 1440p performance mode is very, very stable. And on a 60 Hz screen, this is actually my recommendation, because I personally, and I'm repeating myself here, but I personally don't like 30 FPS games at all. Okay, and here we are with the 4K 40 FPS mode, and please ignore the 120 FPS on my game bar. This is just because the TV right now runs in 120 Hz. When you look at the VRR information on the G2 right now, 120 Hz is selected, and all what I've done is I actually activated 120 Hz under the screen and video option. Please keep in mind VRR is still disabled, because we have displays out there or screens, they're actually supporting 120 Hz but not VRR. Okay, so that's why I like to show you this, because now you get actually a nice 40, or it's actually not nice, I have to talk about this a little bit. So target is 40 FPS, as you can see here in the Fidelity mode, and that's true because it is not stable 40 FPS as in other games like Horizon Forbidden West or Ratchet & Clank or Spider-Man. Unfortunately, and this is really interesting, I'm not able to capture any drop below 40 FPS. So because I was actually in the impression that if now the game drops below 40 FPS, my game bar should actually show this in terms of frame doubling and stuff like that. So when I did the same test here at the same location right now, when I turned around on the QN95B, I had a lot of stuttering, regardless if there was VRR on or off. On the G2 on the other hand, it is very, very stable. I don't know why. So you can, or I can see the difference between when I'm turning around here, because there is almost no stuttering. It looks like perfect 40 FPS. But when I'm coming in this direction here, I can see more stuttering. Very, very fine, very minor, but it is a difference. So I think the frame rate is dropping very, or a little bit, you know, below 40 FPS. It is just very interesting that this is not shown on the game bar. I'm not quite sure what the issue is here, but that's how it is. On the Q95B, the game bar is actually showing when we're dropping below 40 FPS, and it's also showing a lot more stuttering, which is very, very interesting. But I will talk about this stuttering on the Q95B compared to the G2 in a different video again. Okay, 4K 40 FPS is not bad, and in my opinion already a little bit better than the 30 FPS mode, because we're getting a higher frame rate thanks to 120 Hz in the background. The game is able to focus or target actually 40 FPS, but we have of course now the performance mode, and when we just changing this into performance mode, we have our drop to 1440p, and now we have stable 60 FPS. There is no 120 FPS mode at this moment or at this stage because VRR is disabled. The game is just able to run in 60 FPS. So this is exactly the same as before with 60 Hz. Select in the PlayStation 5 menu. Just now the PlayStation 5 is actually outputting 120 Hz. In theory, that means we have a lower input lag on the G2, but to be very honest, I can't feel any difference. It just feels exactly as before with 60 Hz. Okay, so the only option what we have left now is enabling VRR, and I think we should do this now. We're just jumping into the PlayStation 5 menu, going to settings, screen and video, and we enabling VRR, and you can see the screen goes blank, and instead of 120 FPS we have now 119 FPS, which is a good sign that actually VRR is enabled. And this is still right now the performance mode, and this time with unlocked frame rate. So now you can see unlocked frame rate means up to 120 FPS if the game would be able, or the engine would be able to output this, but it's most likely around 70, 80, 90 FPS, which is of course a big plus compared to 60 FPS. But we have another option actually. We can now unlock frame rate turning, or we can turn this off actually, and we're going back into the 60 FPS mode. So it doesn't make much sense, to be very honest. So the only thing what is happening now is if the game would fall below 60 FPS, VRR would catch this and it would prevent any stuttering. But to be very honest, you shouldn't do this. You should have unlocked frame rate turned on if you have a screen with VRR and 120 Hz mode or screen, because then you get in the full, or you get the full experience in this game up to 120 FPS. But again, I haven't experienced 120 FPS at all in this game. It's really around 80, 90 frames per second all the time, or during heavy fighting sequences, of course, a little bit lower. But that's actually the best mode, in my opinion, to play this game on a VRR compatible display. Okay, and then we have one mode left, the 4K Fidelity mode with unlocked frame rates. But let me tell you one thing, it is very, very rare that you actually have 40 FPS or more in this game. If you watch Digital Foundry's analyze to this game, then you know already that this game runs most of the time in this mode around 30, 35 up to 40 FPS. So it rarely hits 40 FPS and it rarely hits over 40 FPS. On this very location here, I had on the Q95B a lot of stuttering with VRR on, with VRR off. I don't know exactly what is going on. Here with my G2, first of all, the G2 is not stuttering at all. It shows a perfect smooth picture all the time. I mean, you can see that 40 FPS or lower than 40 FPS, it is not sharp anymore in the background, but it is not stuttering at all. On the Q95B also I was able to see when the game drops below 40 FPS, but here on the G2 it is not possible. I'm not quite sure what the issue is here, or what the difference is actually. I don't think that suddenly the game runs better on the G2 compared to the Q95B. This doesn't make any sense because the display is actually just displaying what's going on the screen. So I need to actually investigate this a little bit more, because I have the feeling that first of all the Q95B, the game bar on the Q95B is better in terms of detecting frame rates when it comes to drops below a certain point, compared to the G2, but on the other hand, it looks like the QN95B has a very big problem with VRR when it comes to certain frame rates. So I will make most likely a separate video about this. Okay, so now we talked about the different performance modes on the PlayStation 5 in combination with a LG G2 or CX and of course a QN95B. The main question is now, how much or how big is actually the difference between 4K, native 4K and 1440p? And as always, I prepared a little bit of a comparison, so let's watch this. Okay, so what is my summary now? My summary for The Last of Us on the PlayStation 5 is actually quite simple. I don't like 4K 30 FPS, or let's say like this, I don't like 30 FPS games anymore. The minimum what I need actually is 40 FPS, but unfortunately 40 FPS in this game is not stable as in other games like Horizon Forbidden West or Ratchet & Clank. So the best mode in this game, in my opinion, is really the 1440p performance mode with activated verbal refresh rate, because then you get a frame rate up to 100 FPS actually, and this is not bad. So here right now we're talking about 92 to 95 FPS, and this is absolutely great playable. The optics are still great. Of course you lose a little bit of sharpness compared to the 4K mode, but to be very honest, I rather have almost 100 FPS, or now just 80 FPS, than actually 30 FPS. That's a huge difference, okay? Anyway, this game, in my opinion, from the story and gameplay, a must buy, but the price, again, it's absolutely up to you. If you like to spend 99 Australian dollars here for the physical copy, I think PlayStation Store is asking for $125, which is ridiculous. I mean, that's absolutely up to you. At the end, it's a hobby, and we spend money on a hobby or we do not, okay? So that's absolutely up to us. No one else can tell us where we actually should spend our money, okay? That's for this video. I say thank you very much for watching me. I see you guys next time.